Welcome to our first lecture. This one is going to be the shortest of the semester. I just want to introduce the 4 anti-bias education goals that we will be learning about this semester. I think one of the big overarching philosophies of this class is this kind of quote, "Every child deserves to develop to their full potential," which is from the author, Louise Sterman Sparks, who wrote the actual book, Anti-Bias Education. It first came out in 1989. I was a child then, but I do have an original copy from '89. I didn't buy it then. I bought it when I was a teacher just a few short years later. But Louise Sterman Sparks kind of came up with this idea of anti-bias education. And she's wrote quite a few books about it. But her idea is kind of this big idea or philosophy that every child deserves to develop to their full potential. So develop in many, many different domains, physically, cognitively, how we think, socially, and emotionally. And that's in order to kind of develop our full personality and our full identity. And that is affected by a lot of different things. Our identity is affected by when we grew up. Me growing up in the early '80s is going to be really different than people who are in their 20s and they're growing up after the millennium kind of started, right? Which is going to be different than my grandmother, who was born in the 1920s and lived through the Depression and the World Wars and things like that as well. So our history and our time and place plays a part in that. Our race, the languages that we speak, the place that we were born, was it in the United States? Was it in California? Was it in New York? That'll be a big difference. Was it in a completely different country and we've immigrated as a child or we've immigrated later? Our culture, the foods that we eat, the ways that we interact with people, also how our bodies develop and the abilities that we have and the disabilities that we have as well. So there's many things that go into our identity, and we're going to be examining those this semester. What I'd like you to think about in this first semester, this first week of the semester is, what would the world look like if there was equal access for all children? And how would this change education and early childhood education? Those are huge questions, right? So I'm going to have some other questions for you to kind of examine your thought process on this. This is an online class, so if you wanted to, you could take out a piece of paper and a pen, or you could just kind of think and reflect on these ideas throughout the semester. Hint, hint, this would also help you as you're kind of thinking through your personal narrative essay, which I described in the welcome video for this class. We're going to be kind of reflecting on your own childhood and now how that affected your identity. But these are some questions that you might want to think about throughout the semester as we're learning more about children and families and how we are growing as people. Who were your role models, right? What was your favorite part of school as a child? What was your favorite subject? What did you do at recess? How would people describe you? What makes you happy? What experiences do you think impacted you the most? If you could teach anyone or anything, what would you teach? What type of people do you want to be surrounded by? What are your success stories in life so far? What emotions do you want to feel? If I had enough, I need enough money in order to, like, what do you want to do with your life? If it was impossible to fail or I had enough money, what would you do? What are your core values and why did you become an educator, or why are you going to go into working with children? So just some ideas to kind of think about those questions that I just asked. If we could raise children in this amazing environment where everyone had the same kind of opportunities to succeed, what would it kind of look like? And what does that look like for you as a child and as you were growing up? Those questions are kind of designed to help you think about, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do with your career? And how do you want to impact children? The children in your life, maybe, that you're raising, are the children that you work with professionally or want to work with professionally. How are we going to create a society that is equal and just for all those children? And have you had those same experiences as a child, or do you want to have different experiences than do you want to set up different experiences for children than what you had? The 4 goals that we're going to kind of be learning about in this semester are kind of designed to support each other. And these goals are the anti-bias education goals, or I might call them ABE throughout the semester. And these are designed to influence each other, because these goals are designed to create a safe and supportive learning community for children. So these are the 4 goals, and I'm going to break them up. But they're 4 goals, and we consider one to be the first goal to be an identity goal. The second is a diversity goal. The third is a justice goal, and the 4 is activism. So we have 4 goals. Broadly, the first one is about identity and how we develop it. The second one is about diversity. The third one is about understanding justice. And the 4th one is about seeking activism. So the first goal is to nurture the construction of a knowledgeable and confident identity as an individual. So the actual goal is each child will demonstrate self-awareness, confidence, family pride, and positive social identities. So basically what this means is that we are going to be helping children develop healthy identities, healthy development of their personal identities. So we want them to understand who they are as an individual, who they are as a group, their cultural group, their race group, their class group, their language group. We want them to feel good about themselves, right? I love the idea of family pride. So each child understands who they are, they're confident about who they are, and they have a lot of pride in who they are. And I just think that's a beautiful way to kind of put it. And they feel positive about it generally. Maybe we don't feel those ourselves, and we want to give that to the children in our lives we're working with or kind of raising, or we do have that and we also want to pass that along. But I just love those kind of ideas that it's embedded in this first identity goal of our IBE goals. So self-awareness, confidence, and pride. Another way to think about it is, how do I nurture the idea of self in myself and then in other people? So we want you to have a strong sense of who you are and a lot of pride and confidence in who you are. And we want you to nurture that in other people. A big part of that is to know thyself, to have self-awareness, to have thought about yourself, to enjoy who you are, so that you can go ahead and give that gift to other people. The second one is each child will express comfort and joy with human diversity. They have accurate language for human difference and deep, caring human connection. So once again, I just think these are beautiful, huge philosophical ideas. But the basic around it is that we are all different people, right? We all come from diverse backgrounds. We all have our own unique personality and identity. And that comes from the diverse backgrounds that we all have. I shared in the welcome video that, and the personal narrative when I was talking about it, that me coming from a military family really affected that. So coming from the Navy, moving around a lot because of my dad's job and his deployments really kind of changed who I was as a person. They also made me from a very young age realize from moving around that everybody's different. Every place is different, every person is different, and we all have these really diverse backgrounds. And I'm really glad that my family taught me that that's a good thing. That I love that you are different, that you are a unique individual, and I want to have empathetic interactions with you. I want to know where you are from. I want to understand more about you, because I want that caring, deep human connection, which I think is so important for the diverse society that we all live in, right? We're all different people. So how are we similar? How are we different? And how can we connect together and bridge those differences? So how do I engage in an empathetic interaction with those from other backgrounds? Because it's not always sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes people have a different worldview or a different perspective that's really hard for you to understand because it's so different, or it's so different from how you were raised or how you see the world. So how can we have an empathetic interaction with someone whose worldview is maybe incredibly different than the worldview that you have right now? The third goal is all kind of about modeling how to identify bias or unfairness. And you think, this is a class about kids, right? This is so heavy and deep. I think children understand automatically kind of the first two. I've never really met a very small child who didn't really kind of have a lot of like pride in their family and who they are. Well, the world kind of hits us as we get older, and that becomes harder and harder. Children kind of have an innate understanding of these goals, especially unfairness. You're thinking, how would a child know that? If you've ever had a Snickers bar and you need to share it between two children, right? They know exactly, their little laser eyes can see down to the millimeter which one is just a little bit bigger than the other part of the Snickers bar, right? They see unfairness. especially if you have sibling relationships and things like that. That's where it can get hairy. You like the baby more, that type of stuff. So children, I think, innately understand unfairness, and we're trying to give them the language to describe that. So we want to teach and model them how to identify when something is being hurtful to them, that unfairness has happened to them. We want them to identify when they are being stereotyped, or if people are saying really inaccurate things about them or who they are or the family culture or languages that they come from. So we want them to recognize that bias and that unfairness that they might see already in that world. And we also want them to understand that unfairness hurts, that if they want to be respected for their family and their identity and not have stereotypes and inaccurate messages, then they need to be able to speak out when that happens to other people as well. So we want to teach children how to think critically and teach them the words to use when they see unfairness. So it's as simple as seeing that the Snickers bar was cut in half unfairly, and then it'll go into things like kind of bias and stereotypes that we'll learn about throughout the class. Now, our fourth goal is kind of activism and how you take action when you see unfairness in the world. So each child will demonstrate empowerment and the skills to act with others or alone against prejudice and or discrimination or dissimulation. So how are we going to encourage children to stand up when they see a bias or an injustice? So if they see, and I think this is a pretty innate kind of human thing, is that we want to have caring interactions with other people. So if we see that somebody isn't being treated respectfully or fairly, how do we kind of help children see that that's unfair and maybe even talk about it or draw attention to it as well? So how do I stand up for myself when I am being treated unfairly? When someone is not recognizing that I am a diverse individual with my own perspectives and is not being empathetic in their reactions or their interactions with me, how do I stand up for myself? And when I see that happening to somebody else, how do I stand up for that person as well? Because a lot of when we're raising children and when we're working with children, what we do and what we say really matters. Kids are little sponges. They're always watching what we do, and more importantly, how we model those interactions. So a lot of times if we want to raise kids that are kind and respectful, they're watching us. So we can tell them, say please and thank you all the time, but what we do really matters. So if we want them to be polite, we'll say, say thank you to the waiter when they bring your food, but they're watching how I interact with that waiter. Am I being kind? Am I leaving a tip? Am I being nice? Am I, cleaning up, my part of the table, something like that. So they're watching how I am polite to the waiter. And then they're also hearing me tell them, use please and thank you. But it's what I do that they're really kind of seeing, and we call that modeling. So what kind of messages am I sending to a family or specifically to children? There's nonverbal messages, and then there are verbal messages. So my verbal message might be polite, but my nonverbal messages is how I interact with and treat that waiter with respect and being polite to them so that I am modeling those good behaviors to my kids. So what message do we want to send, and how do we want to send it? So why do I think that it's important to be polite to people? Because I believe that everybody, going back to that first goal, is a unique individual who has their own experiences and worldviews, and I want to empathetically connect with that person. And so part of that in the service industry is being a polite customer, listening to the person, saying please and thank you, being kind to them as we interact when they're kind of serving me my burger and fries, right? So what message do I want to send? That I respect everybody. How am I going to do that in that particular sense? By being polite, kind, and empathetic in my interactions with people within the service industry, because I'm modeling that for my children. I'm modeling that respect that I want them to have for everybody. So that was the 4 ABE goals. We're going to be learning about this the entire semester, but in this case, this was just an introduction to the 4 goals. You're going to be learning about it more in this week in your work online, your assignments and things like that. And we'll also be learning more about the goals each week after this as well. We'll be going more into depth, into detail. Otherwise, that is it for this video lecture, and I will see you guys more online. Thanks so much.